everybody, Dave here from GroundCloud, and this video is to show you how to do detailed incident analysis from the GroundCloud VEDR system. So when there are incidents, of course, the system can supply MP4 files individually for each camera or each channel as they're called. But what if you want to see them all together? You want to see as things occurred, both cameras or even more than that if you have them, as well as things like speed and accelerometer values and gyroscopes, orientation. So to do and see all of that together in one place, you would use a special piece of software called the MDTPlayer. That's because there is a file that comes out of our system that at the moment would be provided to you by GroundCloud support for a particular incident upon request. And here's a file like this that you would receive from us potentially. Some big long bunch of numbers and things has in there the date of the incident, things like that. But notice it has the .mdt file extension. And there is software to analyze this on both PC Windows as well as Mac OS. So to start, let's check out the installation and getting the MDTPlayer working on Windows. Okay, in this section, we're going to show how to install the MDTPlayer for Windows. So here we have the zip file downloaded, and it's downloaded to our downloads folder on this PC. So we'll just double click this. This is Windows 10, by the way, but this will also function in Windows 7. So coming into that zip file, opening it up here, now we have the installer, which we will simply double click on. This is going to launch the installer application. We have to, of course, give this permission that we're allowing it to install. We have the setup wizard that we'll just click on next through using the default options. I already had it installed, that's why I gave that little message here. You wouldn't, so we'll go ahead and just click on next. If you like a desktop icon here, it's a nice little feature, click on next. And finally, click on install. And that's it. Click on finish here. And when we're done, here we have the MDTPlayer icon created right on the desktop. Of course, this would also be found right here in Windows. If I were now to type in MDT, I can then find it right there as well. So to start up the app, simply double click it, and under the gear item there, let's just make sure that we have speed format set to miles per hour instead of kilometers, unless you're in Canada, of course. And everything else should be fine like that. And from that point forward, everything else is the same. Okay, now for Mac OS, procedure is very, very similar. The way that the app runs is identical. But on Mac OS, especially newer versions of Mac OS, for example, on this one here, I am running the latest version of Mac OS at the time, which is something called Mac OS Catalina, and that is version 10.15.2. Could be after that when you're seeing this video, but that's okay. Now, by default, on Mac OS, there's a bit more security on Mac OS. So if I were to just double click the install package that looks like this, I would actually get a problem warning error message here. It says it can't be opened because Apple can't check it for malicious software. So that's kind of a built-in security profile within Mac OS. So as a workaround, what you can do is effectively right-click the installer package and then select Open. All right, now we get the same sort of warning, but I do have the ability to click Open and override that. And once you do that, we get the install dialogues, very similar to what it looks like on the Windows. So I'll just hit Continue. I'll go ahead and click Install. I have to authenticate, in my case using my fingerprint. In your case, you might have to type in your username and password, and the installation was successful. All right, so now the package helpfully says, would you, now this is a security option here. So macOS again has very tight security in terms of even what areas of your hard drive that applications can access. So what this is doing right here is it's by default, it's allowing it's basically you are giving permission to the MDTPlayer app to access or open files in your downloads folder, or in subfolders would be fine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK to grant permission. And then lastly, macOS helpfully asks, now that we're done with the installer, should we just toss it in the trash or keep it? So I'll just go ahead and move it to the trash, and now it's gone. All right, now that we have the MDTPlayer installed for macOS, everything else works exactly the same, like on Windows or on macOS. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this MDTPlayer file, and when you first open it, you might have some configuration that looks like this. Doesn't matter. What we are looking at here is a 2-camera setup, or 2 channels. So I'm going to go ahead and click this first icon and put it into the split view of just 2 channels here, or 2 cameras. And notice over here, we have this file list that pops up. Same thing as Windows. So what I want to do is double click that first file, this MDT file over here. And when I do that, notice that we have both camera angles, both cameras. So this is the forward facing and then the driver facing over here. And what's really cool is if I press the play button here, that they play simultaneously. So in this case, this is a driver who wasn't paying attention. She's actually on the phone, and all of a sudden, bam, comes up and slams into the car in front of her. Now, in this case, fortunately, there were no injuries, but still, this is obviously going to result in an incident here. Got the radiator flushing out. There's a little bit of, hopefully not smoke, but just mist rising out of there. All right, so that's a quick view of how you can watch the 2 videos together. But let's make it a bit more interesting now. So this icon up here, where it says kind of this little eye, if I click on that, notice now I have a graph here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this window smaller now that we've checked that out, so I can see that. So we've got a graph here, and then next to it there's a globe up here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and this is pretty cool because now this is actually going to show us in real time where the vehicle is during this incident. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move back to the beginning, and by default you're going to see the G sensors, which are detecting shock and deceleration, as well as the gyroscopes, things like that, as well as speed, of course, we want, and RPM. In our case, we're not connected to the engine, so that's not necessary. Now, we also don't have things like, we're not detecting turn signals or things like that, so we can turn those off. So what we're seeing down here are the different G sensors, gyroscopes, and the speed. So now what's cool is if I press play a little bit, you can see here we go. We're coming along, and then there's some right there. There's the impact. You can see there was a harder braking right about here, and then there is the impact. So this is what the gyroscopes are doing and the G sensors. But if I want to, let's say I just want to look at the speed of what happened here, I can turn off some of these gyroscopes and G sensors, and now we're just plotting the speed. So I've left the speed here, right, and you can see a plot of it. And now this is sampling the speed every second or so, and that's why it's stepping down like this. In reality, there was a smooth curve that as she hit the brakes and slowed down and then hit the vehicle. But we can see if we back up here and move the scrubber here, at any point of the frame, I can see the exact speed right here, 42 miles per hour, and it's also plotted here. So that's a great way to see exactly what happens. So for example, and then notice, I'll back it up again. We'll take a look at where she was. So notice this arrow here is actually moving right along the exact strip of this US highway where this incident occurred. So it's a very cool feature to see exactly where things happen and when they happen, the exact speed. Now, lastly, I want to point out that notice there was a shock alarm that impacted right here. You can see that down at the bottom. And that corresponds, of course, right when she made impact. So right there. So that makes perfect sense. So that's what triggered the incident and the video upload. And so that's what the unit was doing. And so these are also very interesting to see. If the driver had suddenly turned hardcore, you would have a warning here, a turn G-force sensor line would be right there. Or if there was a really hard braking, slamming on the brakes, you might see that under this acceleration there. And it's interesting to see that that did not trigger. So while she was braking, she was not slamming on the brakes. And I'm sorry, that would be right there under braking. Acceleration, that would be, if she had stomped the gas pedal hard, etc. And of course, there is the shock, which did fire. Okay, now, as far as the other options that are available up here, this is the settings up here. Again, want to make sure that the speed is set to miles per hour, which it is by default. And all of the other type formats here, you can just choose to see, whether you want it to have in military time or sort of standard US standard time, and display time from camera, things like that. Okay. And notice that this will actually, we can see the timestamp is actually stamped on here. The date of this incident was January 2nd, 2020. Here's the time and the time for this channel as well. We have the different frames. We have 600 frames in this video clip, so that's showing the specific frames there. And lastly, there are some different options that you can do up here. So this mosaic setting is not really applicable for us. Okay, the next icon up here is the snapshot. Let's say I wanted to take a snapshot of this exact moment. I can go ahead and click on this icon here and say, here I want to have both of the cameras, and I also want to have the vehicle ID, the lat longe, and G sensor. Driver ID would not be in there, but we definitely want, let's say, the date and time, maybe even the heading, speed. And then if I go ahead and click on Start, the save is done. Now by default, you can see right in here where it's going to save this. I can change that by clicking this button here. But the files in this case were saved to my Documents folder, MDTPlayer, and then JPEG. So if I wanted to see that where that is here, I could do that by going to my Documents, to my MDTPlayer, and under JPEG. All right, so right there is where I've got separate files for each camera right at the moment that I chose it, and notice that those items that I wanted to have overlaid are right there. So we have the speed, looks like she was doing about 28 when she hit that vehicle. That's pretty fast. Could have been a little bit less than that because the system is really, it's only sampling about once every 2 seconds. So I think she was going a bit less than that. Now, also GPS lat long, etc. Timestamp, of course. Here's the next one where you can see the exact same detail that was requested on here. Now, coming back to, and then when we're done, we can just hit close. All right, the next big thing is, let's say we want to have an output of a video file with all of the same sort of timestamp information on it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here where it says Save MP4. And now we have the same items. I want both channels. If we want audio, if audio was enabled, in this case, let's say we want the audio from the driver cab, which would be camera 2. Then same type of options. Let's say we want to have the speed, date and time, heading. And now I'll go ahead and click on the same save location. We can change that here if we want, but we'll hit start. You can see the progress of creating those videos, and now the save is done. In this case, it's saved to the MDTPlayer folder under video. So if I flip over to my Finder window here, and now I look under video. So now I have channel 1 video. And notice that once again, we have the different items here. Now it's important to note that the video starts right where I had the playhead in MDTPlayer. So let's say in this case, the impact had already happened. And let's say I didn't mean to do that. So I'll go ahead and just select those, delete them. I'm going to come back here. I'll close out of that. I'm going to bring the playhead back to the beginning. And now I'm going to select the video output, cam 1, cam 2. And I'm going to select these same things here. And then I will click start, render them out nice and fast. We are done. Now, if I flip over to the Finder and look at channel 1, okay, now we're starting from the beginning. And bam. So now we've been able to create a nice video that also has the overlaid information right on it. And so the same thing for, here's the driver video. She's talking on the phone and not paying attention. Bam. Uh-oh. All right. She's okay. No airbag deployed. That's good. All right. We come back. We hit close. And then lastly, there are things like meta files that's not really relevant for us. If you wanted to do a print screen, if you wanted to have a specific moment here and you wanted to send that to the printer, you could do that if you wanted. I'd say better to make a JPEG snapshot there. And lastly, just about here is just where we find the version of this software. Okay, folks, that's it. That's a nice fast overview of the MDTPlayer for VEDR incident analysis. If you have any questions on that, by all means, reach out to our support department at 218-864-7900 or send us an email at support@groundcloud.com. Thanks, everyone. Let's be safe out there. And we'd also encourage you to use these videos as training elements for the rest of your crew. So you can look at these incidents, you can play them at a safety meeting, and while not shaming your driver, we can absolutely learn from our mistakes, and so encouraging others to drive more safely out there. So remember, lives are on the line, so let's do all that we can. And we care for you deeply. So God bless you guys. Take care.